Tonight on Unsolved Mysteries.
For more than 20 years, Mary Clamser suffered from the debilitating effects of multiple sclerosis. Then a violent summer storm swept over Mary's house and brought with it what can only be called a miracle. A powerful bolt of lightning that apparently released Mary from the shackles of her devastating disease. July 1986. A young Marine is nearly killed during a brutal hazing ritual called a Code Red. If it sounds like a movie plot, it's because the film A Few Good Men, starring Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson, was based on the incident. Tonight, the disturbing untold story behind the movie. Most people know Reggie White as one of the most feared players in the National Football League, but he's also an ordained minister. Last January, a tragic fire ravaged White's church in Knoxville, Tennessee. In the ruins, investigators found the unmistakable signs of arson and the ugly taint of racism. They call him the Taunting bank robber, but now his flamboyant criminal career has come to an end, thanks to one of our viewers. Join me for these intriguing cases and much more. Perhaps you may be able to help solve a mystery. Almost everyone knows about the hit movie A Few Good Men, starring Tom Cruise, Jack Nicholson, and Demi Moore. But not everybody knows that A Few Good Men is based on an actual event. It tells a story of Marines on trial for attacking a squad member in a brutal hazing ritual known as a Code Red. Amazingly, that event still has repercussions today. Repercussions that may have led to the mysterious death of one of the Marines who executed the Code Red. David Cox of Needham, Massachusetts, joined the Marines straight out of high school. Being one of the proud and the few was all he ever wanted. In 1986, David was stationed in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, a naval base the U.S. had refused to give up when Fidel Castro came to power in the 1950s. Political tensions kept the base on constant alert. Trouble filtered down to David Cox when another platoon member, PFC William Alvarado, wrote to his senator about Marine misconduct.
We didn't actually decide to have a Code Red for Alvarado on our own. Our platoon commander had given us an implied order that if we were good Marines, something should happen to Alvarado. Saturday night, we went into Alvarado's room. We blindfolded him and gagged him and then dragged him off of his bed. Dave started shaving his head, and within 5 minutes, he had stopped struggling, so we knew something was wrong with him.
Something's wrong. He's not breathing. Get the gag.
David Cox convinced his platoon mates to stop the hazing.
Oh, she's back up, stop it.
So we removed the gag, untied him, and he still didn't come around. He was still unconscious. So at that point, we started to panic.
Everybody else, get to your rooms.
Alvarado was rushed to the hospital. He recovered, but his 10 attackers were slapped with charges.
Relax, Cox.
Sir, yes, sir.
That's relaxing. Come on, sit down. Have a seat.
Don Marcari was appointed to defend David Cox.
They're going to charge you with attempted murder. They got a confession from you, and they got a pretty beat-up Marine. Doesn't look too good.
Sir, I was just following orders, sir.
David claimed the Code Red started with implied orders from his superior officers.
They're prepared to offer you an administrative discharge. It's less than honorable, but there'd be no court-martial proceeding, and you wouldn't be looking at 20 years if you were found guilty.
Sir, but I'm not guilty, sir.
I told David that this was a defense, obedience to orders, that had not been successful at Nuremberg, had not been successful with Lieutenant Calley at My Lai, and plus we had a colonel denying he ever gave an order. So we had the additional burden of now saying he was following an implied order. And it was a very difficult case to win, and I told David that.
All right, Cox. We'll do it your way.
He decided he wanted to fight it because he believed in his heart that he didn't do anything wrong.
David's gamble was a qualified success. He was convicted only of simple assault and sentenced to time already served in the brig. He then completed his hitch, received an honorable discharge, and returned to civilian life in his hometown in the Boston area.
Jack Nicholson was so mean.
6 years later, when A Few Good Men hit the theaters, David felt the movie makers had stolen his story.
Other than that, there was a lot of parts that didn't really happen like that. I mean, for one, the guy didn't die. I mean, you know that. I saved him.
Right.
I mean,
David's reaction was that he was stunned. Here he was watching his life in front of him, and he wasn't getting any of the credit for it.
That was your life story.
The anger came a little bit later, because here was this movie company that was making tons, millions of money off of his story, and if it weren't for him, the story never would have existed in the first place.
David and some of the other Marines involved in the Code Red filed suit against the movie production company. While it was pending, David spoke out about his case on radio talk shows.
Elaine.
By January of 1994, David and his girlfriend Elaine had set up housekeeping together. David was hoping a temporary job at United Parcel Service would become permanent.
Good. And what about the job? Are they going to keep you?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I'm doing everything I should do.
Dave was very enthusiastic about getting on board with them.
I hope so, you know.
I think it was something where he felt that he could have a full-time, steady occupation.
David expected to hear about the UPS job on January 5th, 1994.
Not gonna be able to get a hold of
Because of a back problem, he spent the night before on the couch.
I hope UPS calls. Have a good day.
Elaine left about 8:30. Shortly after noon, she called home.
Love ya.
David didn't answer, but there was a message for him on the machine.
Hi, message for David Cox. This is Jim at UPS. Got some good news for you. Give me a call. Thank you.
So I was really excited. I was like, oh, cool, Dave's going to get this job, and he's going to be so excited. And then I called back again at 1 o'clock to check the messages, and that message was still there, and the UPS guy had called again, too.
David?
At 5:30, Elaine returned home.
David?
When I came into the house that night after work, I realized right away that the doors to all the rooms were open, and our rabbit, who we usually just kept in the kitchen, was like hopping all over the place.
Hi, David. It's Jim again at UPS. Please give me a call. Thank you.
David's truck was still in the driveway, the keys in the ignition. David had left an uncashed paycheck on the dashboard and his 9mm gun in the glove box, but David himself was gone.
I immediately had a feeling of dread because I know David well enough. David would not just disappear. And right from the start, I was very concerned.
As the days went on and there was no news from him. I mean, we checked his bank account. There was no activity on his bank account. You start to believe that, maybe something did happen, but why?
There would be no answers until the spring thaw. On April 2nd, 1994, the body of David Cox was discovered on the banks of the Charles River in Medfield, Massachusetts, approximately 5 miles from his apartment.
He was shot, according to the ME, 4 times, once at the base of the rear of the neck, and 3 times in the left side torso area.
David's wallet was still in his back pocket, cash and credit cards intact. It seemed obvious that robbery was not the motive, and police have since ruled out a random attack.
So what we'll do is we'll have photo come, we'll take...
They are convinced David left his home with someone he knew.
It's our belief that he got in the car willingly, that he knew who was coming to pick him up, and that he went to this area and walked into the woods with this person. We really believe that David was what we would call a scrapper. If he knew there was some danger loitering ahead, he would do his best to get out of that. I think that if it was somebody that was just holding a gun in him or something like that, that they would do it within the first 30 or 40 yards into the woods. David was found almost 3/4 to a mile walk into the woods.
I don't know why David was killed. I personally believe it had something to do with the military. He was taken out of his house without signs of struggle. He was wearing his Marine Corps jacket, which he never wore. He was found between two hunting ranges where gunshots would not be unusual, and he was murdered execution style.
Now, there is a movie opening tonight called A Few Good Men.
After the release of A Few Good Men, David had been highly vocal about his story and the U.S. activities in Cuba. David's family believes he may have talked too much.
To say the least, we were trying to provoke a war pretty much every day.
Because of this colonel?
Yeah, he would never say anything directly, but it was certainly implied, absolutely.
Okay, now,
after I heard that interview on the radio, I spoke to him and I said, I don't like what you're doing. I think what you're doing is dangerous.
The colonel had implied...
I think he felt far too free to just speak his mind.
Letters to his congressman saying that...
Police checked out the military angle to David's murder.
We realized there was something going wrong because he wasn't fighting back after a while. And
there's nothing there that shows us that the military in any way, shape, or form are involved with David's death. But we're certainly open to anything that comes our way in regards to the military.
There's this guy there. He's a supervisor. And
David's brother suggested another possible scenario, a UPS connection.
They're taking the good packages and taking them away from the regular...
Stealing.
Yeah, they're stealing.
A couple of months before Dave disappeared, he had mentioned to me that he had come upon a supervisor and one of the drivers involved in some type of activity, what he believed to be was theft.
I interviewed a number of people. They were candid with me, I felt. Certainly, if there was anything there with UPS, I think, as far as they were concerned, paramount was David's death, and they would have certainly told me anything that UPS was involved with.
At this point, the investigation's still open. It'll remain open until we solve it. Again, we'll follow any leads that come through vigorously and remain to do that until it is solved.
I'm angry what happened to my son. I'm angry that someone can do that and get away with it. My life has been devastated by his murder. It really has. A death would be bad enough. A murder is just dreadful.
At this point, police have only one hope. That someone saw David Cox leave his home between 8:30 and noon on January 5th, 1994. Perhaps someone saw the person who picked him up or the vehicle they left in. Coming up, for a disabled woman, a harrowing brush with death apparently culminates in a miraculous rebirth. But first, NFL superstar Reggie White asked for your help to find the arsonist who burned down his church. The capture of a criminal suspect always brings us great satisfaction. Tonight, another fugitive is in custody, thanks to your calls. Thomas Dixon is the walking definition of career criminal. He was paroled in May of 1984 after serving 10 years of hard time for armed robbery. It hadn't reformed him one bit.
This is a holdup. Just stay cool.
During the 5 months following his release from prison, Dixon and a series of accomplices knocked off 7 banks in North Carolina. An FBI raid brought down Thomas Dixon in October of 1984, and he spent another decade behind bars. He was paroled in 1994, as unrepentant as ever.
This is a holdup.
Dixon again hit banks in the Carolinas, 5 in a 7-week spree. He showed up in one surveillance tape after another.
Have you FBI ever heard of Thomas Dixon?
No, should we?
But there was a disturbing new twist to Dixon's M.O. Now he taunted the FBI with advance notice of his bank jobs. When one of Dixon's getaway cars was discovered, federal investigators concluded that he had deliberately left it for them to find. Inside were photos of Dixon's impressive arsenal. In a note, Dixon threatened future robberies and warned of a bloody showdown if anyone tried to stop him.
Dixon was alerting us to the fact that he is heavily armed and he has every intention of using those arms in a confrontation with law enforcement.
1 week before our broadcast, Thomas Dixon struck again, this time in Pennsylvania. Here's Keeley with a dramatic conclusion to the case.
Bob, thanks to one of our viewers, Dixon's most recent heist will probably be his last. After the robbery, Dixon fled Pennsylvania and eventually made his way to Clarksville, Tennessee.
In Clarksville, Dixon took a room in this motel. Pam Poteete, a resident housekeeper, first became wary of Dixon when she cleaned his room.
It's the way he acted. He was weird. I mean, he stood by the beds, in between the beds, by the luggage. He wouldn't ever sit down, didn't want you to make the beds, you know, stuff like that. It's like he was on guard, you know, his luggage. He just was, you know, ready, watching you.
When Dixon's story aired, Pam Poteete recognized him instantly. Within minutes, Pam had contacted both the Unsolved Mysteries phone center and the authorities in Tennessee. By sunrise, FBI agents had Dixon's hideaway staked out.
We knew he was armed and dangerous, and he had vowed not to be taken alive. With that information, obviously you want to approach the subject with extreme caution, but once we got him subdued, he was very cooperative. All he said is, you got me good. Basically that the way that you guys arrested me was the way you needed to arrest me, and it was a lot better that way than, quote, to throw bullets at each other.
January 8, 1996. Fire ravages the inner city church in Knoxville, Tennessee. At first, it seemed an isolated tragedy, but it would soon become linked to what may be a series of vicious hate crimes targeting black churches. This church, however, has a famous voice speaking out on its behalf. Reggie White, the most feared defensive end in professional football. But the man opponents see as a 6'5", 300-pound brick wall with legs has another career.
God sent Moses away for about 40 years to get him ready to face Pharaoh.
Reggie White is an ordained minister. When he's not tackling quarterbacks, he's back in his home state of Tennessee, saving souls. In 1993, Reggie White and two longtime friends in Knoxville founded the Inner City Church by merging two congregations into one. Their goal, to create a church that would serve poor people of all races. Their motto, together we can make a change.
It's very important and it's very vital. I believe that our church is doing things in our communities that no other churches are doing.
You know, the most segregated hour it is in our country is on Sunday, 11 to 12, because blacks go to black churches, white goes to white churches. We wanted to try to have a church that everybody would feel welcome, no matter what the color was.
It was a noble undertaking. With aggressive community outreach and self-help programs, the church thrived. Then, disaster.
I believe in my heart that it was an attack from the devil himself, that there were devil-inspired people that he used to firebomb our church.
We had a big snow on the ground. It was very
David Upton is the church's senior pastor.
When I arrived there, it was a sickening feeling in my stomach to see the things we had fought for, the things we had worked so hard to establish over the years of our ministry, just to see it just go up in flames.
Within hours, agents from the FBI and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms began to investigate.
An immediate visit to this location indicated to us that it was a very deliberate criminal act. The sanctuary portion of the building had been totally destroyed, but there's another building that sits on the back side of the property that adjoins the rear of the sanctuary. It's a building in which there are classrooms and offices. As the agents went through that portion of the structure, they found multiple Molotov cocktails. They found that both floors of this structure had been saturated with gasoline and kerosene, and they found gasoline cans and kerosene cans scattered throughout this portion of the building.
Agents also found racial epithets scrawled on the walls, leaving little doubt that the arson was a hate crime. Reggie White was appalled. That turned to outrage when he learned that his church had not been the first.
The only reason that you're hearing about my church is because of me. But there have been 22 other churches that's been firebombed. And that's a problem. And this problem needs to be rectified.
The statistics are alarming. The count is now at least 24 black churches hit by arson in the past 3 years. The attacks have occurred throughout the South, in Louisiana, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Virginia, North and South Carolina. The most recent arson fire occurred on March 5th, 1996.
Both the FBI and the ATF are looking to see if there are any links. We recognize that someone in Kansas, for example, might say, let's burn black churches, and associates in Tennessee and Alabama and Florida might go out and do those things, but they might use entirely different methods.
I don't believe it was anyone that would be what you would call a professional. Based on the way the fuel was in the building, the way the setups were in the building, I think that they just thought if a little's good, a whole lot's better, and that's what they tried to do, is put enough fuel in there to do the job.
3 days after the inner-city church fire, flyers from two white supremacist groups, the BFI Brotherhood and Skinheads for White Justice, turned up at a bank that had ties to the church. However, the possibility remains that both the flyers and the graffiti were planted as decoys.
With a deliberate act of arson, the arsonist wants us to look in a different direction away from him. So we have to consider the possibility that the racial graffiti was placed there to divert us into a different direction. So we have to consider the racial motivation as a possibility, but we also have to look at other motivations as well.
The inner-city church did not have enough fire insurance to cover all the damage. But with hard work from the parishioners and donations from the community, both black and white, they hope to rebuild.
But the problem is, because racism has alienated itself so that you can't touch it, when it afflicts you.
In the meantime, Reggie White and his fellow pastors keep their congregation's spirit strong with church services held at a local school auditorium.
That's why we're shooting each other today. That's why we're allowing This just makes me more determined. And I know that the only way that you defeat the devil is that you have to do it as a group. And that's why I would say, I would call whites and blacks to come together and find how to work together, because what kills the enemy's tactics is if a bunch of people of all ethnic backgrounds start loving each other.
When we return, for many years, Mary Clamser struggled with the crippling effects of multiple sclerosis. Though her faith never wavered, Mary certainly didn't believe in miracles until a freak accident changed her life. The state of Oklahoma is a natural laboratory for studying the world's worst weather. Here at the National Weather Service in Oklahoma City, meteorologists track an average of one severe thunderstorm every week. Sometimes the storms bring tornado-force winds, sometimes softball-sized hail. Not long ago, one of those storms brought with it a gift from the heavens, what one woman calls a modern-day miracle. August 17th, 1994. Mary Clamser never thought of herself as a warrior, but for 23 years she had fought a battle against multiple sclerosis, a battle she was losing fast. Mary had no idea that this day, an extraordinary event would erase her years of torment and give her back her freedom. In 1972, Mary was 19 years old, vibrantly healthy, and recently engaged to marry Ron Clamser. 6 months before the wedding, she went to the hospital with what she thought was a bad case of flu.
We didn't know whether I had some kind of intestinal bug or whatever. And shortly after being admitted to the hospital, a lot of neurological problems started coming up that we weren't even aware of.
Hi. How you doing?
Mary and Ron were certain something was seriously wrong, but the doctors tried to shield them from the brutal facts.
Can you move your legs at all?
No.
Can you feel this?
I can't feel anything. I feel pain. It was extremely frustrating not knowing what was going on, feeling so many different changes in my body. The left leg was going out. There were bladder complications. So many things were going wrong. It was like I had no control over my own body.
But, like, they won't tell me anything.
The final diagnosis was devastating. Mary had multiple sclerosis. Ron set out to learn exactly what that meant.
It's a degenerative nerve disease. It affects the impulses from the brain to the muscles.
So what stage is Mary in?
They don't know. I mean, one good thing is that she's young.
Ron found out that MS could attack Mary in waves, each episode lasting a few weeks. Between bouts, Mary would appear to be disease-free, sometimes for months. Over the years, however, the attacks could get worse and more frequent.
They told me that I probably would never walk again. And if we did proceed to go ahead and get married, I would not be well enough to have children if I could have children at all. And Ron came in shortly after that, and we talked, and I said to him, you deserve better. You deserve a wife that can walk and a wife that can grow with you and have children with you, and they're telling me I can't do any of this. And I took off the engagement ring and said to him, as much as I loved him with all my heart, the only way I could give love back to him was to let him go.
I just gave it right back to her. And I said, no, I mean, I just have faith that things will work out. And, you know, when you get married for better or worse. We're engaged to be married for better or worse. To me, it was the same thing.
Mary spent the months before her wedding in the hospital, too weak to address the invitations herself. Just 2 weeks before the ceremony, the disease relented, giving Mary enough strength to walk down the aisle. The wedding day was only a brief respite. The MS soon returned. Despite her illness, Mary refused to give up her dream of being not only a wife, but a mother. Over the next 10 years, Mary struggled through 3 difficult pregnancies so she and Ron could have a family, 2 sons and a daughter.
Our children have grown up with a mom that was in the hospital many times, a mom that couldn't walk many times. And it was incorporated into the family life because even when I was ill, my focus always was Ron and the children.
You know, it wasn't something that was easy. Not that I want to say she was a burden, but, you know, we had to carry her to the car. We had to take the scooter apart and put the wheelchair in. So it became not a hassle, but it was a lot of work.
After 23 years, the cycles of Mary's illness had become almost routine. A few weeks, perhaps a few months of disability, then another precious period of normalcy. In the summer of 1992, that cycle abruptly changed.
This attack was different because it went past a year. And prior to that, no attack had gone past 6 months. So we began to wonder, when it went past a year, how long it was going to last.
I could not leave the bed, literally. And I would hear the children arguing amongst themselves. It was your turn to do this or that. Or Ron coming home from work very frustrated. And I remember one night feeling really kind of, the only way to describe it was as if I had died, but I was laying in the back room listening to my family fall apart.
Then came August 17th, 1994. It could have been a metaphor for Mary's life, a beautiful day that suddenly turned dark and stormy. Mary decided to take a bath while she could. As the tub filled, the storm intensified.
I would have to say on that particular day was one of the worst storms I've ever seen in the 12 years we've been in Oklahoma. And at that particular time, the leg brace was up against the porcelain part of the tub, and when I went to turn the knob, I saw the flash of lightning, but I never heard the thunder.
At least 10,000 volts of electricity had coursed through Mary's body, enough force to launch her 6 feet across the room.
Mom, are you all right? Mom, wake up.
Mary was alive, a miracle by any standard, but there was an even greater one to come.
Mary? Mary, I'm Dr. Lee. Tell me, what happened today?
I remember feeling like my body was on fire, pins and needles shooting up and down my arms, and being totally confused.
Just 1 second, sir.
Got my fingers
Okay, Mary.
on fire.
Mary, listen to me. Take a deep breath. Breathe, honey. Breathe.
All of a sudden, I'm feeling my legs.
What's he doing? Hey,
What?
I can feel that. What's?
Oh, no, she can't.
Yes, I can. I can feel that.
How can you look, Mary?
And I started to get really, I guess, agitated. It was like, I feel you touching me. Why do I feel you touching me? Because you have to remember, for 23 years, I couldn't feel my left leg, and for 2 years, my right leg. And now, all of a sudden, for no reason to my knowledge, I feel both of them.
No, that can't be. That can't be.
I mean, I was dumbfounded and shocked, and I didn't know what to think.
Neither did anyone else. Medical literature includes accounts of lightning making blind people see and deaf people hear. But the doctor warned Ron that the effects are often temporary, usually lasting no more than 30 days.
More often than not, the patient can go back to her prior condition. This could just be a temporary situation.
She ran that thing up and down and she felt it.
I know, I can't
In the
explain
next
it,
2
but
weeks,
she
I was in
might
quite a
go
bit of
back to her
pain.
prior condition.
I mean, I was miserable. I didn't even get to enjoy feeling my legs. And every few hours, Ron would even call me and say, I know you're hurting, but can you still feel your legs? I mean, that was the $64 question. You know, it was like, yes.
Incredibly, Mary could soon do more than feel her legs. 2 weeks after being struck by lightning, she walked across her kitchen without a second thought. She didn't even realize what she had done until she found herself at the refrigerator, a dozen feet from her wheelchair.
Ron, honey.
I was at a part of the kitchen that to this day, I can't tell you how I got there.
What are you doing over here?
And I thought, well, I can't handle this anymore because now I'm doing things I don't even know how I did them.
You what?
Yes.
You want to try it again?
Okay.
Hold on to me, okay?
Okay.
All right.
I took some real robotic toddler type kind of walk, and I mean, it was like 3 or 4 steps and went into his arms. And it was like, I just did that, didn't I? And he's like, yeah, Mom, you did.
Mary improved rapidly. A few days later, when Ron Sr. arrived home from work, Mary was waiting with a big surprise. She had walked out the front door and down the sidewalk, completely under her own power. No leg brace, no support.
Now, stand back, stand back. Watch.
The Clamsers were thrilled, but not yet ready to call the cure permanent.
Oh, my.
In the beginning, we did worry about, well, the 30 days. You know, what if they were wrong and it was 60 days? And then I started thinking, I'm not going to worry about it, because whatever amount of time, that's the time I had we never thought I would have.
It's almost like a second honeymoon. I mean, it's almost like year one starts over again.
Today, almost 2 years later, Mary exercises regularly and lives a completely normal life.
I mean, we can dance again, we can go out together and walk again, go shopping together. There's just so many things that we're missing that we have back. And it's just like a rebirth.
When we return, a tragic accident claims the life of a young woman. Now her daughter needs your help to uncover the secrets of her family's past. Recently, we received an unusual request from a woman named LaDonna Alfano. LaDonna was just a little girl when her mother died in a terrible accident. 35 years later, LaDonna has no memories of her mother and only scant details about her mother's family. Tonight, she hopes that will change. December 29, 1961. In the early afternoon, a train left Dallas, Texas, heading west. The route would take it through the heart of downtown Abilene, Texas.
Kids, are you ready? Hi, David, Monty. Thanks for joining.
Around the same time, two Army wives in Abilene, Darlene Alfano and Pinky Johnson, gathered up their children for a trip into town.
You got your dolls? Joined by McBride's also. They're having a sale hot roast. Okay, good.
At around 2, Pinky and Darlene were heading north on Shelton Street towards the center of town. No one knows how or why it happened, but the car ended up right in the middle of the tracks.
What's wrong? Pinky, there's a train. What's wrong? What do you mean you can't get in these cars? It won't start. There's a train coming. It won't start. There's a train. Here we go.
The car was literally torn to shreds, its roof sheared completely off. The human toll was incalculable. 2 of the children died almost immediately. A third would die in the hospital, as would one of the mothers, Darlene Alfano. Her husband, Fred, was by her side.
I was sitting with her, talking to her, and I was holding her hand. She took a very deep breath, held it for a few seconds, and very slowly let it out, and I knew she had expired.
Fred Alfano found himself almost completely alone. He had lost his wife and 2 of his children. His other child, LaDonna, had survived, but was barely hanging on.
They never gave me any hope for any of them surviving. They were all almost universally sure that LaDonna would not survive because her facial damage extended all the way down to the base of her brain.
It's me. Daddy.
Hi, Daddy.
Hi.
LaDonna had suffered catastrophic injuries to her face and head, but against all the odds, she began to recover.
See?
2 weeks passed before Fred could bring himself to tell LaDonna about her mother and sisters.
What happened to Rosa, Liza, Linda, and Tricia?
They're in heaven. And in a playground. So they can play together.
What happened to Mommy?
Mommy's an angel.
Is she really an angel, Daddy?
She sure is.
When my father told me that my mother and my sisters had died, I thought, oh, the angels had come down and gotten them. I was happy that they were angels.
Everybody would talk to her in the hospital, and first thing she would tell them was that my mommy and my sisters are angels in heaven. I've got 3 angels watching me. I knew she would be fine. I felt if she had taken that attitude, she would be fine.
Well, I used to think, why did I live? Why was I the one that survived? I believe that when I was a child, that I lived for my father, that my father wouldn't have survived it.
I think her strength gave me strength. And my only direction in life then was to take care of LaDonna and make sure she survived and had a normal childhood.
Over the years, LaDonna underwent a series of reconstructive surgeries on her face. But there was one thing the operations could not correct: the loss of her mother, Darlene.
I have no memories of my mother at all. I look at pictures of her and I try to remember something, and it's like looking at a magazine article of a woman. I have recollections of my twin and my father and my little sister. My father has told me stories about us as children with my mom, and it doesn't bring back any memories whatsoever. None whatsoever.
Compounding LaDonna's heartbreak was the fact that her father had only met her mother's family a few times. Eventually, what little contact they did have ceased altogether.
After the accident happened, it was just probably too painful to keep in touch with them. And now I've just decided I need to get in touch with them. I'm trying to, get some connection with my past and try to remember something so it will fill in the holes of missing my mother.
One of the only clues LaDonna has is a letter she received from her maternal grandfather when she was 13. It contained a photograph of her mother's sister, LaDonna's aunt, Patricia Ann Hintz.
My Aunt Pat is the only survivor of my mother that I know of. I think finding my Aunt Pat will definitely fill my emptiness. Just being able to touch her and knowing that she was a part of my mother is the only thing that I have of my mother. And it would just knowing her and meeting her and hugging her would be really even enough for me right now.
Join me again this Friday at our regular time for an all-new edition of Unsolved Mysteries.